All right, on this episode of Bouts Talking Bouts, always got to give a big shout out to the sponsors, USG Canada. They're putting out great apparel for boxers, MMA fighters, and for fans alike. Also, big shout out to Sovereign Extracts, putting out some CBD oils, as well as a variety of cartridges, THC, CBD, some hybrid options, and the like. On today's show, excited to be talking to an individual who is an established pro wrestler throughout Canada, making waves in Japan lately, has been featured with promotions like Chikara, Impact Wrestling. I'm talking to Russian Dynamite, Masha Slamovich. How's your day going so far there, Masha?
My day is going really well. How is your day going?
Oh, it's going just dandy, but I imagine you're doing pretty well in a general sense lately. Like, I think you'd seen that the visa for being in Japan has been renewed up until December, I believe. So, I mean, that must be pretty cool.
Oh, it's pretty great. It's a stress off of my shoulders having to worry about it expiring on me. So good to go until a couple months from now.
Yeah, and you've had an interesting career arc in that regard because, like, I was doing my background here, and from what I was seeing, it seemed like you'd had a prior, tenure in Japan, and then after that, you kind of started working some of the, Canadian indies and certain things like that. So, how did that all come about? Because that's an interesting kind of career arc and whatnot.
It is definitely a bit of an interesting path. So I ended up having my debut in pro wrestling in Japan during my first tour here with Reina Pro Wrestling, which is now defunct, to my knowledge. And I was here for a month and a half in the summer of 2016. And after that, I pretty much, went back to the States, and I was working primarily in Canada, but I was also working in the States, more so during the second half of 2019.
Yeah, for sure. And just an interesting lineage, too. Like, I was noticing that, coming up, you're going to be approaching an anniversary there, like November 22nd seems like a very important day there, like getting in the ring and training with Johnny Rodz and everything like that. It seems like it was the culmination of a lot, too. Like, you seem like you're fascinated with wrestling from a very young age. So, can you speak to the importance of November the 22nd in the context of your career?
Of course, anybody's, I would hope, debut date is an important date for them. To me, it was, and I literally have the date tattooed on my arm, so it's very important to me because that was the day that I first set foot into a pro wrestling ring and began my training. And what else can I say about it? I guess it was like at that time the greatest day of my life because I was finally beginning my journey doing the one thing that I've always wanted to do.
Yeah, that had to have been a great moment. And I was seeing like you wanted to get out there pretty early on too. Like you had an unofficial match when you were 17 there. I guess the New York Commission didn't really coincide with the age all that well. You had to have a bit of a dubious backstory about being from Brazil. That sounded kind of interesting there.
Yeah, I did have to have that. I think it was a tag match because that was like the tryout match or the match that was going to be seen by the Japanese scouts and promoters who were going to end up taking me to Reina. And I wasn't yet 18, I was still 17, so I ended up having to get a fake ID to please the commission for that one night until, some asshat decided to run their mouth and expose the whole spiel. But, I mean, it didn't really matter because I had ended up turning 18 about a month or so later and leaving the country.
Yeah, and you've encountered some interesting characters over there. Like I was seeing even relatively recently that you had visited Pile Driver there, and you got to have a photo op with Minoru Suzuki. And I was also noticing you had that tweet that said Minoru Suzuki greater than your favorite wrestler. So that must be really cool because it seems like you're very into like that Japanese like 90s heavyweight kind of style, like Misawa, Kobashi, and a lot of these different guys. So that must have been a really cool moment. It seems like you've had a few of those out there.
It was definitely a pretty cool moment, especially considering that most of my favorite wrestlers or my idols are either dead or retired. So I was like, hey, here's one who isn't either of those. Definitely a huge fan of 90s and early 2000s Japanese wrestling. I watch a bunch of AJPW, NJPW, Noah, like a shit ton of Noah. And like you said, the cool moments here. They just keep on rolling. You know, you always think you have one good one. You're like, oh, this is an awesome moment, and then like the next one comes along. You're like, man, being in Japan is a trip. Aside from it also being physically a trip, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just figured it'd be cool because it seemed like I'd seen you drop a Kobashi style burning hammer or two, so it seems like that's like a key part in the style. But it seems like you appreciate a lot of different, permutations of pro wrestling. Like it seems like you let other styles kind of get into the fold as well. So it's a really like physical kind of fun style to watch out there. I'm very oriented to that style of pro wrestling too, like the all Japan style of wrestling and whatnot.
I am a huge fan of the physical wrestling, the technical part, the hard hitting, brawling part. So I try to, follow that as much as I can in my wrestling, be it meant to do it or not meant to do it. I try to emulate it without thinking or with thinking, that kind of style.
Yeah, because I was seeing like you did a post a while ago too, where you were getting to learn from Marty Jones as well, and kind of get that like World of Sport UK style too. So it seems like you're a real student of the game, which I imagine was imparted on you from Johnny Rodz, just in the sense of like keep going with the repetitions, even if you think you have it perfect, like drill it dozens of more times. So is it kind of like rooted in that kind of ethos somewhat?
Absolutely. At Johnny's, there was no such thing as getting it perfect. Like, you're never done training, you're never done learning, is something that I firmly believe. And, you can do something 1,000 times and then you'll fuck it up the 1,001st time. So, repetition and practice, there's absolutely never enough, and more will not kill you. Same goes for, studying different styles. The more you know, the more versatile you're able to be. You never know who you're going to end up working with, and it's good to be able to work different styles, to work, on the left side and on the right side, because it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared.
Yeah, it's probably paid dividends with just what you've been doing with Marvelous and stuff like that, like just living in the dojo. And I mean, you always hear so much about the work ethic of, wrestlers out there, but it seems like it's paid dividends. Like, I mean, even to the point where you got to work Shin-kiba there. I mean, quite a legendary Joshi venue and whatnot. So just to the prior point, just compounding great moments out there for sure. Some really memorable instances, it seems.
Absolutely. Working not only Shin-kiba, but different places like Nagoya and Osaka were some really cool moments that I hadn't had on the previous tour, because I had never worked outside of Tokyo on the last tour. So it was really cool to go around to different places in Japan this time around. And, that comes from earning those kind of things with your work and your work ethic in the dojo. Our senpais always see me in the ring or lifting weights. I pretty much live in the dojo, so I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, for sure. And just, quite the timeline overall. Like I was seeing too that you got to take part in the Young Lions Cup and whatnot, and how it had always been a dream of yours to, wrestle with Chikara. So can you kind of talk about what that moment was like? And just, I mean, interesting too, because like a different kind of audience too, like maybe like cater your style. I mean, obviously your style is going to be what it's like on a core level, but just with the consideration of the crowd, maybe like a different kind of audience, maybe different psychological considerations. What was it like getting to work the Young Lions Cup? Because that's such like a well-regarded event that's held in such high esteem.
It was really cool because I had wanted to work Chikara for a long time, especially since I used to watch stuff like CZW and Chikara, when I was like a young teenager or whatever. So it was really cool. Like I was working out in the gym one day, and then Mike Quackenbush messaged me. He's like, "Hey, you want to be part of the Young Lions Cup?" I'm like, "Well, you actually know who I am? That's shocking." But of course, I accepted, and it was really cool to go down there the day before and kind of learn how they do things over there, and then actually, taking part in it was really cool. It was a really cool match in its own, and it was just a really cool time to be there. And it's such a fun and different way to do wrestling, for example, compared to like the way we do things here in Japan or the way we do things up in Canada. It's very different, but it's very, very entertaining. And it's just like a great place to be. At least it was for me. I hear people say otherwise. My personal experience was great, so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, definitely Chikara was a promotion that in my early fandom with wrestling, I was just, enamored by it, and just like such an interesting presentation style, but also part and parcel with, being a wrestler. You get a couple horror stories in there a little bit. Like, I understand there was a basement type show that you had a while ago where there was a 5-inch deep hole in the one corner and there was like mites in the ring and stuff like that. Can you talk about that a bit?
Oh man, that was like this. I still to this day have no idea who the hell ran it or how the hell I ended up booked on it, but it was this show in Brooklyn in like some basement of some warehouse, I don't even know. And like we came in and I saw people pulling a tarp over the already set up ring, so I'm like, what's going on? Is everything all right? They're like, yeah, somebody took a bump in here and they got like bite marks on them because there was mites in the ring, and that was the first thing I heard. I was like, oh yeah, we're in for a good one today.
Yeah.
And then, like some guy was using a steel chair to like bump pipes that were hanging like lower into the ring, and using the chair to like smack them so that they would lean against some other pipes and nobody would hit their heads on them.
Oh.
There was no locker room. We had like overturned 2 couches on their sides, like threw some tarp around it and put one of those like camping lights in the middle. We're like, yeah, this is the locker room now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, if you would have seen the place, my words can't even describe to you what this place looked like. It was like you would think someone's getting murdered in the back room or something. They probably were. But like I said in another podcast where I talked about the story, all's well that ends well, and I ended up getting paid and getting some beer out of it. So no complaints. Nobody got hurt, at least to my knowledge.
Oh, well, exactly. It's just you get some memories out of it. And I imagine the 6-week tour with CWF provided some great memories, like the Ice Road tour and everything like that. What was that like, getting stuck in the snow a couple times and then the service truck kind of has to help things along a little bit en route to Winnipeg?
The 6 weeks I spent on that particular tour with CWF among the several other tours I did with them, it's always the best time. Over the course of time passing by, there's a couple of people who are the key points to that tour. They're always there. Some people come and go, but there's like the handful that always stay, and then eventually they become, really, we all become pretty close throughout all the shenanigans. How many other people can say that they wrestled damn near in the Arctic Circle of Northern Ontario? It was like negative 40 degrees outside, and it's like all these little places, people would never get to see that. Like, how many people can say they've seen all these tiny little lakes in Ontario? How many people even know that there's lakes in Canada? Because I didn't know that until I went there. Honestly, that was ignorant of me, but it's true. And, all the good times that we have, like partying in Winnipeg, and all the somewhat shitty times that you think you might die when we were stuck on that road and we might have gotten eaten by wolves if someone didn't come rescue us. It all makes for good stories, and that's what wrestling is. There's the shitty shit and the good shit, and eventually you'll write a book about it. So just enjoy the road, enjoy the experience.
Oh yeah, it's a great attitude to have, and you've got to go to some cool places. Like I was seeing Dominican Republic was a place you got to check out, but also you got to wrestle in your hometown as well. You're out in Moscow, Russia there, and I think that's kind of a curious thing because like I think some people presume that you're like a work Russian as opposed to a shoot Russian, so I think that maybe catches them off guard that that's your actual hometown and stuff like that. So what was it like getting out there and getting to perform? I imagine that was a hugely euphoric feeling there.
Yeah, a lot of people are confused about versions, but yes, I am actually Russian. It's not a work. It was such a great feeling because even when I was growing up until like a few months before I went to Russia, because I go every year at least, or I go more, but I didn't even know that there was wrestling because I had tried to look for it and I was unsuccessful up until that point. And then I found IWF Moscow. I contacted them like through email, and it was really cool to even know that there was wrestling in Russia. More so, it would be 40 minutes from my damn house, you know?
Yeah.
And just performing in my hometown it was something that was kind of like on my bucket list, but I didn't even think that it would happen because, like, well, you know, WWE is going to have to come there and I'm going to have to be signed and like all these what ifs, and then actually getting to do it, you know, even with an independent promotion. Mind you, IWF is a great promotion, probably one of the best in the nation. It was a really awesome feeling. And I really hope that when this pandemic is over, I get a chance to go back and wrestle there again.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that that all happened to you. And just, yeah, with the backdrop of not necessarily realizing it's there and then all of a sudden seeing there's a bit of a scene going on, that had to have been hugely cool. But I kind of wanted to touch on the pair of matches you had there for Impact. Like, you got to work Havoc, and then you had a match with Jordan Grace where you got to like kind of show some more moves in there and whatnot. What was the general overall experience like? I also understand the Jordan Grace match was a little bit of a surprise, one you found out about the day of there. You had to kind of pivot what your plans were for that given day. But what was the pair of matches like and just the general Impact experience?
It was something that came unexpectedly, something that I knew well enough from Johnny Rodz to prepare for the off chance that it might happen, and it was indeed one of those things that would end up happening. I had shown up in the morning to help, you know, set up the ring and the venue upon a recommendation from one of the Impact's wrestlers that I had actually went to their seminar back when I worked in the Maritimes in April. So they remembered me and they said, "Hey, you live in New York," thinking that I was Canadian. I'm like, "No, I live in New York. I'm not Canadian." So they told me to come down to the venue, and I guess they just needed a small sized woman for Jessica Havoc to wrestle that night. So they came up to me. They're like, "Hey, you have your gear bag? You want to wrestle?" Obviously, I said yes, and they sent me on upstairs to get my hair and makeup done, get in gear, and, you know, walk out of the curtain essentially, because time was limited. But it was an absolutely great experience, you know, just being backstage and being there from the very beginning, like helping to set it up and then like taking part in the show. It was really awesome. And the fact that they ended up calling me back the next day was even more unexpected, because I had left with, you know, no impression that I should show up the next day because no one had said anything to me. So I was ready to go off to WSU, and then at like 4:30 somebody calls me. They're like, "Hey, where are you? Your match is at 6:45." And I'm like, "Excuse me? What match?" So I pretty much had to just jump in a car, drop everything I had, you know, walk through the door, put my hair and makeup on, and walk out to the ring. Because, I mean, if the other day was pressed for time, then, you know, the match with Jordan Grace could have been very chaotic, but in my opinion, it went off very well, and I'm very happy with it, and still very happy for the opportunity that I got those 2 days.
Yeah, it was quite a good match. I actually just finished watching it a bit ago before this interview. Just a real physical, good quality back and forth match there. But you kind of mentioned something interesting earlier, like sometimes there's the perception you're Canadian as opposed to American, which I imagine is kind of problematic because, like, I mean, I can sympathize with this too because I don't have a car myself, so sometimes I have to get a little resourceful with like the public transit and the carpooling a little bit. But it seems like it creates some fun memories too. Like, I was seeing that you were retweeting Veda Scott, and you were like, "Oh, I really felt the napping in Walmart parking lots part," and just like the 10-hour drives and some of those aspects of like the touring life. Can you kind of talk about that? Because I imagine that's probably a facet that you're maybe missing a little bit just with the backdrop of the pandemic and everything.
Yeah, that retweet from Veda Scott, that was actually an OD to CWF, because Lord knows we've spent sleeping in parking lots of Tim Hortons and Walmarts throughout our tours. But, you know, me not having a car, definitely I've had to get creative with my transportation. But again, I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, because that's how I have so many cool stories and all these like ridiculous experiences that wouldn't come if I was like flying places or just driving by myself. thinking. There was this one time that I did a loop. I think it was New York to Albany to Maine to Buffalo and then to like some town in New Jersey. And I didn't have a car, and this was like 3-day weekend. You know, people are like, how the hell are you going to make this show, all these shows? And I actually remember wrestling Jody Threat in Maine that Friday, and I had to wrestle her again on Saturday in New Jersey. And I told her about like this entire road trip, and she was like, "Dude, how are you gonna do it?" I was like, "Hey, I'm getting in a car, and I'll see you Sunday. I don't know how, but I'm gonna pull it off." And when I walked in the locker room on Sunday, she was just like, "I am beside myself." She's like, "How the hell did you even make it here?" But you know, I ended up driving with like one person, staying at like a friend's sister's house in, I think it was like Albany or something like that, like sleeping on her floor. We ended up helping her move from one house to another, drove up to Buffalo, drove like halfway from New York through Pennsylvania, through like Murder City, slept in some weird hotel, and then ended up on that show, and it's like completely snowed us in, and we actually got into a freaking car wreck on the way home after that. So that was like a weekend of like 6 different cars. Thank God everyone was all right. But I mean, the stories from that weekend, some of them I can't tell on this podcast, but I mean, they were entertaining, man.
Oh, I think there's something to be said for me keeping certain stories to yourself. I've probably got a couple of those in my own life as well. But I mean, it seems like also there's some great moments like beyond just the, I guess, like sometimes chicanery and sometimes like some of the memorable moments in those kind of regards. Like sometimes like some great information is imparted between different parties. Like I was seeing Matt Vertigo had shouted you out a little while ago too, just saying how much he'd kind of learned from just being in a carpool with you and just going on those road trips. So it seems like a great tool for just like exchanging ideas and people learning from each other too, just like honing each other's respective crafts and whatnot.
Dude, 100%. You know, especially that car ride with Matt Vertigo. That was actually on our way to Chikara for the Young Lions Cup.
Oh, okay.
And I literally had no idea who he was because somebody had put us in contact through email, like not even social media. So I was emailing this person. I was like, I don't even know if you're a guy or a girl. I don't know who the hell you are. But I'm like, yeah, like some dude I once rode with to some town vouched for you. It must be safe. So, you know, he was just like, yeah, I'm outside of your house in a white car. I'm like, it's a way to the show, whatevs. And it was actually one of the coolest rides ever because, you know, we were just shooting the shit and, you know, he was telling me stuff and I was telling him, you know, he was asking me for like advice and I was talking nutrition, wrestling, travel, all that stuff. And, you know, it's really great to sit in a car for hours and listen to somebody because within a couple of days, within a couple of hours, people can impose knowledge on you that will literally change your entire career. And that's happened to me before. And to be on the other end of that spectrum and to be the one who's actually getting listened to was, you know, pretty cool because a lot of people just don't listen. And it was really cool to have somebody who actually wanted to learn, was asking questions, and I was learning from him as well. And, you know, I could only pray for more rides like that. That's something I definitely do miss about being on the road is just, you know, the camaraderie and the road trips and talking for hours on end. Some of the best stuff, aside from the in-ring stuff, is being on the road.
Yeah, well, you mentioned enjoying being on the teaching end of that spectrum, but you also articulated that you've gotten to learn from some great individuals as well. Can you recall, I guess, like a distinct car ride that was really impactful as far as like, oh, wow, that is something I can add to my style and that'll totally be a game changer?
It was not, I don't think actually that the thing that I mentioned just now, I don't think it had anything to do with wrestling, but more so it was advice that would come in handy in the business. You know, things that people don't tell you because either they don't know because they haven't been through it or because they haven't yet been to that level. You know, you can learn something different from everybody and just learning things about like fitness and nutrition and the finances of wrestling and like how to carry yourself and stuff like that is also very important aside from learning how to physically wrestle. So having somebody to pass that kind of knowledge on to you might at some point even be more important than what you do in the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it's cool how much control you have over every aspect of the gimmick and stuff like that. Because I was even seeing in the summer that you were kind of like taking the opportunity to like actually draw out different designs for your gear and stuff like that. So it's cool that you have that kind of autonomy and the comprehensiveness to look at like all the different facets of wrestling. Because like you said, it goes so far beyond. It's like how you carry yourself. It's nutrition, getting the right amount of recuperation and just a myriad of factors.
Absolutely. There's people out there who are just like, oh, so is all you do is wrestle shows, right? I'm like, absolutely not, because not only do you have to keep training in the ring and try new things and polish up the old things, you have to lift your weights, do your cardio, eat right, come up with gear designs, actually get your gear made, take care of like, being a woman, my hair and my makeup, and then merch. The list of things to do is asinine. It just does not end with wrestling, and the people who don't do those things are the people who don't make it. So the more you put into it is essentially the more you will get out of it. The more control you have over your own gimmick, and the more, for lack of better words, the more shit you give about yourself and the products you put out there, the more it's going to do for you.
Yeah, it coincides with the tattoo on the left ring finger there, wrestling over everything.
Absolutely. That's a motto I live by. It's tattooed on my left ring finger because it's a ring and I'm married to the ring, haha, so many jokes. But it really is true because, some people are married to their work, be it like a lawyer or a doctor, and I am 100% married and committed to pro wrestling.
Yeah, well, it's there in the work ethic and like in the tape study when you're not out there. Like, it seems like you're very much on the ball with all of that kind of stuff. But it's also cool that you have like a style that can lend itself to literally working whoever. Like, I saw you had a great match with Lil Blaze as well. So can you kind of speak about that, just like the versatility and just like working, matches like that? Because I quite enjoyed that. I was peeping that just a bit ago as well.
First of all, me and Lil Blaze started out actually working each other on one of the first CWF tours that I did. He wrestled me as Gina Gomez, so he would take my leggings and like my t-shirts and stuff them in this giant bra and put on some ridiculous mask, and we were just like, this is, we're like, this is Gina Gomez, guys. And it was really cool because we would always practice like a bunch of these crazy lucha things. I actually did like one of these ridiculous moves that he taught me here in Japan when I wrestled the main event in Yokohama, and I was like, I messaged him afterwards and I was like, I'm never doing that shit again, dude. But it was a great time working with him at Limitless, because I think we hadn't worked for just about a year at that point, but I always loved doing intergender matches. And, I feel like we got to do, me being the bad guy, him being the good guy, which is a little different from the usual intergender where the woman is the good guy and the bad guy is the man. So we kind of switched the roles there. And I think it went off pretty well. I think that, I'm able to channel my creativity and be given any opponent, and we can just make it work somehow. And that match was an example of that.
Yeah, and I try to like avoid the terminology almost like intergender wrestling, because like for me it's getting to a point where it's like, it's just wrestling. It either works or it doesn't. Like, I mean, either people can go and it's a great match and you're out there telling a great story. Like, the gender roles aren't really like as much of a thing. I mean, like, you watch like, say, like a Marvel movie, for instance, and you don't think like, oh, this is an intergender fight. It's just like, oh, it's like a superhero beating up someone else kind of thing.
Yeah, in wrestling, coming up in Johnny Rodz school, I was one of like 3 women there at the time. So I was taught by men, essentially, for the first 2 years of my career, or 3 years, or however long. Like, it never made any difference to me being in there with a woman or a man, because if you can wrestle, you can wrestle, and if you can't, you can't. Your genitals aren't gonna have much of an influence on that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you said, you can either go or it's like it either works or it doesn't. Like it's like you don't necessarily have to impose these like gender roles on the situation per se. But yeah, it seems like there'd been certain people that like maybe weren't as cool with that. Like I think you'd said you had a men's tournament that you showed up to, and then some guy threw a bit of a fit because he said he wasn't going to job to a woman. It's like, come on, man, it's 2020. Like you need to get over whatever that is.
Yeah, that was exactly what happened. That happened in December of 2018. And when he said that to me, I literally laughed in his face because I thought he was joking. You know, I was like, oh, ha ha, right? And he's like, no, I'm serious. I was like, oh, well, you're a fucking clown then. And exactly what happened was they told him to pack his shit and leave if he wasn't going to work the show like a normal person. And I wasn't the least bit offended. I thought it was funny because you made yourself look like an asshole. What is there for me to get mad about? I still went on and wrestled that night, and you packed your shit and went home. So I think he quit wrestling too, so good for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, good riddance in my estimation, just even based on that kind of story there. But I'm kind of curious about like the music you jam to with like the wrestling training and different things like that, because it seems like you have pretty eclectic tastes. Like I was seeing you were shouting out, bands like Black Sabbath and Motorhead and stuff like that, but then you were doing the Snack the Ripper shout out on Instagram too. So like what are the general kind of artists and whatnot you're jamming to when you're getting ready, like getting pumped up for the different workouts associated with being a wrestler?
It like varies so much from day to day or like every couple of months or something like that. Like if I'm working out in the ring by myself and I'm doing like blow up drills, I'll put on like a full album so that I don't have to keep switching the music. I could just focus on my work, and I'll usually have like 3 Days of Grace or Green Day or Fozzy or Kiss playing, just like all their songs in a row. If I'm lifting weights, it helps me actually to force me to take breaks between sets to like go and change my music. So I'll have Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, and then I'll switch it into like, I don't know. I always forget my playlist unless I'm directly looking at it. I wish I had my phone near me, but I swear to God, it'll go into like country music. I'll be listening to man, I forgot every artist that I ever listen to when I'm in a podcast. It'll be country music, it'll be rock music, it'll be like punk music, it'll be so many different things. I'll be listening to like Roy Orbison, and then the next set will be Motorhead, and then it'll go back to like Green Day, Metallica, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm kind of the same way too. It's almost like dependent on the mood, and it's interesting too that you compartmentalize it depending on the exercise. I've actually talked to like MMA fighters and boxers and other wrestlers too that are kind of similar. Like sometimes they'll do like a rhythmic centric style of music if say they're doing like a footwork exercise or cardio, for instance. So it's cool that you're compartmentalizing it in a similar kind of way there.
Yeah, I feel like I do break it up by exercise now that we're talking, because I actually like don't really notice that, especially when I run in the mornings. I'll listen to like some like early like 2000s rap. I'll have like T.I. going or something like that, or like I don't know, Chris Brown or some ridiculous shit like that. And then by the time I'm like finishing up my run, I'm listening to like Parkway Drive or something like that.
There's blood in the water. Yeah, it's a good tune. I like that. Yeah, but it's been great getting to talk to you, and I want to, be mindful of the time and everything, though. So to that point, is there anything you'd maybe like to add as a parting thought as we're wrapping up here? Maybe a shout out to the Pro Wrestling Tees store or something of that nature?
Absolutely. As you all may or may not know, I have a Pro Wrestling Tees shop, prowrestlingtees.com/Masha Slamovich. I have 3 shirts there at the moment. Probably going to put out a new one sometime soon because everyone's bored of the old ones. I have, if you are in Japan, I have merch on the Japanese website that is linked to Marvelous. If you are in America or Canada, you can message me directly on Instagram or Twitter. I still check my DMs for everyone who saw the fiasco of me not being on Twitter. I still check my DMs. But you can contact me there for pins and 8x10s and whatever other needs that you would like to contact me for.
Yeah, social media can definitely be a questionable place sometimes, but it can be a good place as well. Like I'd seen that kind of timeline, context provider where you had like the tandem pics with Gangrel, like the one on the left where it's like 2011 attending your first wrestling show as a fan, and then on the right you're making your Limitless Wrestling debut in 2019 rather, and he's with you in the picture too. So I thought that was really cool. Like you can get some great stuff from social media as well, even though it can be a bit of a cesspool certain times.
Absolutely. That was also another really cool moment that got to happen in my wrestling career. And aside from those kind of good moments, Twitter is a fucking cesspool, like you said.
Yeah, great note to leave things off on for sure. And yeah, great talking to Russian Dynamite, Masha Slamovich. Thanks for all the time and the awesome insights, and hopefully you have a great rest of your day there.
Thank you for having me, and I hope you have a great day as well.